You're listening to The Portfolio Composer, hosted by me, Dr. Garrett Hope, where business and creativity go hand in hand. Join us at theportfoliocomposer.com for news, talks, and workshops. This episode is brought to you by Dorico, the music notation software from Steinberg. Dorico Pro 3 is a major new version with game-changing advances in note input, notation, and engraving. Also available from Steinberg is Dorico Elements, an entry-level application that packs all of the essential power of Dorico Pro into a simple, streamlined package that is ideal for those getting started. Find out more later in the show. Hello, and welcome to episode 241 of The Portfolio Composer. My name is Garrett Hope, and I am your host, your coach, and your teacher. Thank you for listening to the show and being a part of learning what it means to be a business owner and a creative in the 21st century. If you've listened to the podcast for any time at all, you know that one of the overriding philosophies of this podcast is that we need to create a portfolio of income-producing activities. And we can do that strategically and carefully so that we're not wasting our time, we're not spinning our wheels and going in 1,000 directions at once. You can make a living in the arts if you know how to think businessly. And that's what this podcast is all about. Today's episode is with composer Nainita Desai. She is a British composer who has done just about everything: video games, films, streaming. She's a powerhouse. And this conversation was so much fun to have with her. I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed speaking with her. But before we get to the interview, I want to make sure that you know that tickets for the Ultimate Music Business Summit 2022 are on sale now. And through the rest of November until December 1st, tickets are discounted. And then they go to full price starting December 1st. The Ultimate Music Business Summit will be January 6, 7, and 8 of 2022. There will be over 30 presenters, plus a keynote, real-time presentations with 2 tracks happening at the same time, Q&A sessions, one-on-one speed networking events, and cocktail party after the keynote. It's really going to be something incredible. There are 2 ticket options. There's the extremely affordable regular ticket and the VIP ticket, which will give you lifetime access to recordings of all the presentations, as well as access to the Q&A sessions and a special networking event and more. To get your ticket, go to musicsummit.biz. That's musicsummit.biz. All right, enjoy the interview. Nainita, welcome to the Portfolio Composer podcast.
Hello, Garrett. It's lovely to be here today. Thanks for inviting me.
My pleasure. I'm so excited to speak with you, especially about one of your more recent projects, this film about an autistic character. But before we get into that and the heart of how you've built your career, this is a question I ask everybody on the show. And like I just explained before we were recording, the name of the podcast comes from the investment world, where we have a diversified portfolio of assets. And I think as creatives in the 21st century, we have to have a diversified portfolio of income-producing activities. So what, Nainita, is your portfolio? What are all the things you're doing to make a living?
Well, I'm very fortunate that for many years now, I've managed to make 100% of my living out of composing music for film and television. And so I feel incredibly blessed, and touch wood, I think, that'll hopefully carry on for the rest of my career. But I've run my whole career with a little motto that I've had, and it's lots of crumbs make a biscuit. And so I started off, I have a degree in mathematics, and that has helped inform the way I structure and organize everything around me. But after I finished my degree, and I went to film school to study sound and sound design, and I had different aspirations as a teenager and as a young adult growing up, because I never thought that I could make a living out of composing music. I didn't think that it was a career, a viable career, that, people pay you to write music for film and TV. And so that side evolved organically, though it was something that I always wanted to do. So to answer your question, my portfolio, I've done a little bit of lecturing as a freelancer, guest lecturing at universities, and I ran a module. I still run a module, but I don't do it for the money anymore. I do it because I feel a responsibility to give back to the industry, which has given me so much. So a little bit of lecturing and mentoring and advising and talking to music students, which gives me such joy. And what else have I done? I've written music, lots of different genres, lots of different areas. But, Garrett, thinking about it, I've always composed music. I've been lucky in that people have always paid me to write music, whether it be video games or I started off as a sound designer on feature films. So I wanted to be a sound designer. I was really, really interested in sound for film, and I grew up loving film as well. So that gave me a fantastic foundation and grounding in understanding the music for screen area. But I became a sound designer on features, and that in itself was a massive hurdle because I was always a bit of a geek and a tomboy at school, and I was into maths and physics and science and technology, and I think it's blurring the lines between finding a place for technology and creativity and blending those together. I was into computers and programming and MIDI programming, and so all that kind of skill set was a fantastic foundation for becoming a composer, as well as all the other stuff that you have that goes with being a composer. Not just about the music. It's not just about the, learning music theory, which I didn't learn, actually. I don't have a degree in music and a formal education in music. So that's another thing altogether. So having spent a couple of years as a sound designer, going to film school, studying sound, being an assistant, I did that for a handful of years, and it wasn't creative enough for me. And I got about as high as I could possibly get in that world. I was working on big movies at Pinewood Film Studios and Shepperton and all these great places with great teams. And it taught me a lot about collaboration and working as part of a team. That was really important. And then I made the decision to give it all up and follow my true passion, because you only have one life, and go for your dream. And I was really interested. I'd always been interested in music engineering. One of my aspirations was to be, a really successful record producer and a music engineer. I was very influenced by Brian Eno and Daniel Lanois, and Peter Gabriel was one of my big musical heroes because he runs this incredible recording studio complex in the UK called Real World Studios. And he started up this amazing world-class recording studio complex and record label, and musically his music really resonated with me, and he was very much into world music. So when I was at university, he actually came to the university to see what the students were up to. It was like meeting the Queen. I was in a panel of 6 or 7 students, and we were introduced to him, and we shook hands with him. And we were in our studios, and he said, "Well, what are you working on, Nainita?" And I was creating a little piece of MIDI programming software for Indian classical cross rhythms, Indian music, and trying to sort of do all sorts of world rhythms mixed with MIDI programming and stuff like that. And he said, "Oh, that's really interesting. Why don't you look me up when you finish your degree?" At the time, I was doing a postgrad diploma in music information technology. There were very, very few courses at the time in the UK in music engineering or, film music. That kind of thing didn't really exist. And it was the only course that I could find that was kind of related to what I really wanted to do. So I finished my course, and of course I didn't follow what Peter invited me to do, because I moved into film sound. And then a couple of years later, when I gave up being a sound designer, I remembered what Peter had said sort of 2-3 years before, and I looked him up and I wrote him a letter, because emails didn't quite exist in those days. This is the mid-90s. And suddenly, about a week later, I got a phone call from Real World Studios inviting me to go along and have a meeting with the studio manager. So off I trotted and had the most amazing afternoon just chatting about all sorts of things, given a tour of the studios. And I was just being passionate and enthusiastic about my experience as a sound designer and what I felt that I could offer Peter. And I basically talked myself into a position as Peter Gabriel's assistant music engineer.
Did you really?
So that was my path into music engineering. And I learned so much, not just using the gear and the technology, but what I came away from it was about working with people and communicating with people and working with all sorts of musicians and amazing record producers. And that was fantastic. But, what I learned from Peter, one of the things I walked away with was what he does is about getting the best out of people creatively, with the people that you're working with, in a way like Hans Zimmer does that with his collaborators, and nurturing those collaborations and amazing musicians that you're working with and capturing the magic of performance. That was, if you put it into a nutshell, one sentence, capturing the magic of performance. So when you're working with musicians, the psychology of dealing with people is really, really important. And that's something that I've come away with. And when I work with people, whether it be as a head of department employing musicians or working with directors and filmmakers, communication and the psychology and the politics of working with these people can be highly strung divas and creative individuals. That is incredibly important to working as a film composer.
Okay, you've walked around, you've opened 6 doors of interesting things I would love to walk through. But we're going to go way back here to something you said at the beginning when you started, because this is so fascinating. And you had this little aphorism, and I would like to follow up on it. And you said, lots of crumbles make a biscuit. Mm-hmm. As I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, oh, these are all of her crumbles, and the biscuit is your career. Mm-hmm. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Yeah, and also I think your source of income, mm-hmm. where all the different types of work that you do, it all adds up, into my annual income, basically.
And that's the idea behind having a portfolio
yes.
of activities. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
So you started your career in university as a mathematics major, mm-hmm. but you had this deep passion for the audio world, not music, but that's wrapped up under the greater umbrella of audio, yes? Yeah. So tell me an experience you had that made you just fall in love with sound, because you made it seem that movies kind of became this gateway into a bigger world of sound design. And I imagine for you, this is wrapped up within mathematics, because as you know, sound is physics.
Yes.
So tell me one of the experiences you had, a movie you watched, or one of those moments where it just was magical.
I mean, in terms of audio, not music.
Yeah, that makes you fall in love with sound.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of sound inspiration, I remember watching Apocalypse Now and hearing the great, legendary Walter Murch's work on that film and Francis Ford Coppola and the way they used audio as a storytelling device, using the sound of the fan, the ceiling fan that was going round and round, and that then morphed into the sound of the helicopter. Mm-hmm. And that had a huge impact on me. And also watching and listening to the Coen brothers movies like Barton Fink was a really, really important film. I think there's a New York sound designer by the name of Skip Leavesey, who's worked on many or most of the Coen brothers movies. So I was diving into their work and watching films that had a huge impact on me in terms of audio. And I think, sound is a very important narrative storytelling device. It's, 50% of the experience when you're watching something is due to the sound. So, in a very cliched way, if you're watching a horror movie, and I remember, watching a few horror movies like The Omen when I was growing up, absolutely terrified. And so I used to switch off the sound. And when I switched off the sound, I suddenly felt better.
It's not scary anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, because I realized, oh my gosh, you're walking down a corridor. The music, the impact that the music has was quite potent and really sort of made you feel so much. Mm. And with music, as a teenager, my dad used to take me to the cinema on a Saturday afternoon. And he had this habit of, we used to go and watch a movie like the latest James Bond movie, and it was a real treat. And then In those days, you could just stay in the cinema, in the theater, and not leave, and you could watch the movie again for free and no one would notice. So we used to watch a movie, every movie that we went to, we'd watch it twice.
Huh.
And so I'd watched the movie and found it really an enjoyable experience. And then we'd watch it again, and watching it again made me then focus on other things in the movie. My senses would be heightened to the sound and the music. So that was a really interesting experience, being aware of music and sound. And my mother brought when I was really little, my mother bought a turntable, and we used to go to, have you heard of Harrods, the department store?
I have, yeah.
So they had this fantastic record department, and in the summer sales, they had this legendary summer sales. We used to go to the sales and go to the record department and pick up just albums, vinyl albums for about, $1 or 50 cents, and in the sales, and buy all sorts of weird, outcast, bizarre sort of albums but they were really cheap. So we just used to buy them and bring them home. And a lot of them were film soundtracks of TV themes and film themes. And I remember one of them, I just put on this music and it just blew my mind. I was just so entranced and it transported me to another place. And a lot of it was music by John Barry from the Bond scores and the movies of the 60s and the 70s. And that introduced me to the world of film music. I remember this compilation album of music by Ennio Morricone and hearing, the good, the bad and the ugly. And just, I heard the music from these films before I was exposed to the films themselves. And I thought, wow, what is this sound? It's just incredible. Of course, I was listening to pop music and jazz and all sorts of stuff on the radio, and I'd make up my own mixtapes, listening to the top 40 hits every week. And, I learned the violin and the piano at school, and I had learned Indian classical instruments at home, as a second-generation British Asian child growing up in the UK. So all of those influences just piqued my interest. And of course, watching film, which was a transformative experience for me, it was a window onto the world for me. And I just loved learning about the world through film and television. When I was growing up, there were only 4 TV channels. We didn't have all these cables and satellites and things. It was a big event watching TV in the home. And I'd watch TV shows. And the first thing that piqued my interest was the theme tunes.
Yes.
I love those theme tunes. And I'm rambling here, but that was what me into, sound and music.
So now when you're composing, where does sound design stop and music begin as you're working on a film?
Sound is music to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's all part of the experience. And, silence is music as well. The way you map out music in a film and the audio, the whole experience. And I've utilized that in my last couple of projects with For Sama, which was nominated for an Oscar last year. And that was a very minimalist, sparse score. But it took a long time to get to that point where we were using sound as part of the storytelling narrative device as well as the music, so that the lines were blurred between the two. It's set in the Syrian Revolution uprising that happened over the last 7-8 years. And there's one scene in the film, for example, where there's a Jeep, an open-top four-wheel drive vehicle driving through the streets of Aleppo, and you hear the bombs and the shelling going on around you. And we originally had a big piece of music that was quite filled with tension and energy and momentum and quite terrifying. And we just stripped it all out. And we just had the sound of something that sounded like a heartbeat. And the sound of that pulse, that heartbeat, blended with the sound effects, the diegetic sound of the bombing going on, blurred together. And you didn't quite know whether you were listening to music or sound effects. And it had a lot of impact,
I personally, as a lover of films, think it's much more effective as a medium when these things are taken into consideration like you're describing. I used to teach a course at the university, an honors course on film music and how the movie is told through the music and the sound. Mm-hmm. So we would examine films to see how they're working together. And you're absolutely right. It's not just music and it's not just sound. They're working together to drive the narrative or to comment on the narrative even sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's a powerful, powerful experience.
Mm.
Since you kind of took us there, tell us a little bit more about The Reason I Jump. So the film itself is based on a book written by an autistic child, and it explores what it's like to be autistic. Mm-hmm. And how did you get into that world then?
Yeah, interesting question. I mean, there's so much. I mean, I was brought on very early on in the process because the director, Jerry, wanted to blur the lines and create this immersive sensory experience using audio and sound design and music. So where the sound design, if you're sort of trying to divide the two, where the sound design is commenting on or observing the abstract nature of the experience of autism that these characters are experiencing, the music is really an insight into the emotional experience of autism they're experiencing. So instead of treating it like a fiction film where we'd have themes for characters, for example, we devised these musical concepts to illustrate the world of the characters and how they perceive their world. So, for example, or the characters or the autistic non-speaking characters perceive time in a different way. They see the detail in objects before they see the whole picture, as opposed to us neurotypical people who will walk into a room and see everything around us, and then we may focus on little details. So I needed to find a way of translating that into music. So I would create pieces of music that would have little fragmented details of little musical fragments that would feel like a jigsaw puzzle, pieces of a jigsaw puzzle coming together and then forming a whole picture unfolding around you. And another concept we came up with was, because the characters are non-speaking, I wanted to give the characters a musical voice. And we thought, why don't we use the human voice, but in a more abstract way? So I took phrases from the original book that was in English, translated them back into the original Japanese, and key phrases like "we are outside the flow of time" or "beautiful circle," for example. And I broke them down into their fragmented elements in consonants and vowels and syllables, and reconstructed them using the human voice in various layers and in a very sort of fragmented way, so that when you see the titles coming up on the screen, for example, it's actually the human voice that is saying the words of the title of the film, but translated into Japanese. And also in the film, the characters communicate using this letterboarding technique.
Oh, okay.
They press the keys on their keyboards, and you have a bit like Stephen Hawking, you have this voice that says, ita o sa aka, and that's how they communicate with the world. So when you see these letters coming up on the screen in the graphics, I actually integrated these as sung vowels and syllables and sung words being pieced together. And I used a lot of signal processing, and what else did I use? Just granular processing of the audio and multiple layers and techniques to sort of create that experience. And of course, each character had their own instrument as well. And there's one girl who's from Africa, and we didn't want to be too on the nose. So I used an instrument called a halo. It's a handpan, which kind of resonated with this particular character, Justina. And, there were all sorts of intellectual concepts that we used to represent the world of these autistic characters. But I wanted to translate them into music and try and subconsciously, subliminally get across these ideas, these abstract ideas, to the audience when they're listening to the score intertwined with the sound design. And another really important thing that we did was working closely with the sound designer. They gave me a lot of found sound, sync sound from the film.
Oh, nice.
So as a tribute, as my homage to Walter Murch and Apocalypse Now, there's a scene in the film where you see this ceiling fan going round and round. And they gave me the sound effects of these table fans and ceiling fans. And I created these polyrhythms and chopped them up and created these rhythms out of these sounds, and just took found sound and built pieces of music out of those found sound elements. So you start off with the sound effects, and then you blend and grow into pieces of music. So you don't quite know. There's one piece where I created a rhythm track out of raindrops, and you see this book on a table. and you hear this piece of music and there's a rhythm track, which is sort of like this glitch rhythm, but it's all made out of raindrop sound effects. And then you see the sound design has lots of raindrops falling on the pages of the book, and you hear the actual sound of the raindrops falling. So there's this kind of blurring of the lines, which is hopefully really, really effective.
Sure. It's like where the audio, the diegetic stuff, becomes music concrete, and that in itself becomes just pure music itself. And so that spectrum of sound becomes an analogy for the autistic experience in a major way.
Yes,
Yeah.
very much so. Yeah. I mean, that was all built around, there's one key sentence in the original book, which was very inspiring. And this boy, this autistic boy has the ability to hear the sound of electrical humming going on. It was really like an electrical generator. And his senses are very heightened to that. And in the book, the analogy is, he can hear the hum of this generator and the sound of the electricity grows and grows and grows until it sounds like a choir of angels. And we thought, wouldn't it be great to try and get that across in the film? And so visually we have that, and using audio. So I took my voice, the human voice, and I layered it up. So it was like 40, 50 times until it sounded like, from the sound of this electrical hum, it grows and sounds, and it becomes a choir of voices that just grow and grow and grow, which was a fun creative challenge in the film.
Oh, that's so great. Oh, yeah, I was listening to what I could find online. I haven't had a chance to see the film yet, but it really struck me as powerful and poignant, too. I think you did a great job.
This is the sound of a solo cello that dares to be different. This is the sound of an amazing instrument played by an incredible player. This is the sound of an emotion so intimate you'll feel like you're resting your ear on the instrument's body. This is the sound of 10 techniques, 47 articulations, and an attitude to uniqueness. This is Poiesis Cello, a unique way to tell your story. For Contact Player, learn more at sonoracinematic.com.
This episode is sponsored by Dorico, the future of scoring. And we want to feature real Dorico users so you can know that real composers out in the world today are using Dorico to make their careers happen.
My name is Homayoun Kazemi. I'm a composer. I'm studying my master's degree in the Utrecht Conservatory in Holland. I study spectralism, and I combine Iranian music, melodies, and a lot of stuff from my culture. There are these quarter tones that you can use. The fact that Dorico can play these quarter tones. The magic for me is parts. I hate making parts, but Dorico is like, hey, I will do it for you. Usually, like 90% of the time, it's what you want. And then you just do a little bit modification, and then that's it. And that saves a lot of time. Even the print, like I showed one of my teachers a print, and then he was like, wow, this is different. I mean, even the print looks different, the fonts and I maybe the DPI or something, I don't know, but it looks really good on paper as well. For contemporary composers and people who want to do graphic notation, Dorico is now going into it. It's the beginning, but even now it's really good. Yes, I would definitely recommend Dorico. One of the main reasons and the first reason to get Dorico is the price, which is really good. And also you get a lot of features, you get the sample library, you get the ease of making parts because it saves a huge amount of time. When you're composing or when you're working, you don't really have to think about finding things. If they're just there, you just have to have a general knowledge about the shortcuts and the whole tab system, and then it will go great.
The kind folks at Dorico have set up a special web page so you can go and download a free 30-day trial copy of Dorico. So go and do that. I have been using the program and I'm absolutely in love with it. Go to www.steinberg.net/TPC. So what are you working on now? What gets you really excited?
Oh wow, I've just started work on a huge drama series for a company in America that is very, very exciting, and I'm not allowed to talk about it because I'm NDA'd up to here, but it's really groundbreaking, very exciting, and that keeps me busy for this year. But I've got a lot of other projects on at the moment. I'm working on just finishing off a feature documentary called NIMS, about a man who broke all world records and climbed 14 of the highest and most dangerous mountains like Everest and K2 and you name it. And he broke the records. He climbed 14 of them in 7 months. So that's never been done before. The last record holder did it in 7 years, and he's done it in 7 months. So the imagery is spectacular and really exciting. And we're going to be recording the score at Abbey Road in 3 weeks' time. So we'll get ready for that. And
Haha, exciting.
And quite a few other projects, sort of doing a Netflix original series at the moment, which is a true crime thing. I can't tell you the title because it's called Sophie's Story, and it's based on a murder that happened in Ireland about 25 years ago. So it's kind of supernatural, creepy, horror-esque, weird, bizarre kind of story, and having a lot of fun writing the music for that at the moment.
So horror, supernatural, creepy, but it's also real murder mystery.
But it's real.
Yeah.
Yeah, this cannot be real. This is an amazing story. And I'm working on a couple of video games as well. So lots of crumbs make a biscuit. So,
Yes.
So I'm working on a couple of video games, which again, I can't talk about them. One is for Electronic Arts and another one is like a follow-up to Telling Lies, which is a video game I scored for Annapurna a couple of years ago. So, the foundation, the bedrock of my career is documentary, and that's what I'm known for. But I do sort of branch off into feature films and now more and more dramas, TV dramas these days, and video games and production music. And I've just been commissioned just finished writing the music for a famous choir in the UK, based in the UK, called Voces 8, who are really, really popular. So I've just written a track for their latest album. I'm not sure I was meant to tell you that, but anyway, I don't know how much I was meant to say, but that'll be coming out this year. And yeah, it's all, I love the diversity and variety is really important to me, stylistically and in the genres that I work in. Just, it keeps you fresh. That's so important. Just being fresh musically. I never know, working from one style to another. I'm just finishing off a feature doc for HBO. It's called Persona, and that'll be out soon. And that's all music like Daft Punk and electronica, synth wave, upbeat.
Wow.
All synth based. So that was good fun to work on.
So how do you manage having all these irons in the fire at once?
With great difficulty. It's not easy. This profession is full of, it's either feast or famine. And I hate turning down work. I love working, for starters. And in terms of, I have to be incredibly organized and, meticulous in file management, in terms of practicalities. I have an assistant who's, helps me out a lot in that regard, but I have to be incredibly organized. I tend to work on 2 projects a day. I'll divide my headspace up, where like morning and afternoon, I'll work on one thing, and then afternoon and evening, I'll work on something else. Sometimes I'll just have a meetings day. So I tend to sort of psychologically, I don't like to mix up creative days with business days. Obviously, before the pandemic, I used to be dashing around having business meetings, and I love meeting and being networking and social with people. I love going to film festivals, and that's really important to me to sort of nurture and network with people. But, I have my laptop, I'll go to a film festival and I'll be working in my hotel room. So, it's just constantly chugging away. And so I tend to divide my days up into meetings where I'm not being creative. If I'm having I wouldn't say I ever have a creative block, but if I'm not in the mood, even though I've got to meet deadlines constantly, I might just do a lot of paperwork or admin or have meetings. and then I'll break away from that and just dive into, having incredibly structured days where I'm composing. I say, right, I divide my day up into, I've got to get another piece of music written within the next hour. And sometimes I'll have to write 9 or 10 minutes of music a day.
Wow.
And I'm incredibly disciplined and go, right, I have to get it done. If I don't get it done in that day, I'll have to stay up really late to make sure I get it or catch up the next day. So you can never, ever miss a deadline. Just incredibly organized with how many minutes of music I have to write a day.
That's pretty intense. That's a lot of music to write.
Yeah, it can be when it's really up against it. But I try not to do that too much.
But it happens, right? Because projects stack up. I want to follow up something here. So you divide your time, multiple projects at a time, but then within the week, you try to reserve the admin days for themselves. So you're not mixing creativity with admin. How do you divide your admin time between the responding to email and the minutia of running your business, as well as getting new projects in the pipeline? Because as creatives, we're always finishing something, we're promoting something we've already done, and we're always trying to get more work in. So how do you manage that?
For years, I didn't do that. I used to work on a project, and then I'd be out of work. And I thought, oh, I haven't got any work. And the time it takes you to drum up project and pitch and contact people. I might contact a filmmaker or a raft of filmmakers, and they go, oh, well, we haven't got anything for 3 months or 6 months. And so you need to keep spinning those plates all the time. And I didn't do that for years, and I just used to be out of work. And I think the longest period I was out of work was for like 3 months, I thought, oh my God, baked beans on toast I can't afford to feed the cat, And it took me a while to realize that while I'm working on projects, I have to allocate time and finding out what's going on in the industry, nurturing clients, keeping in touch with people. That's so important. I mean, it's as important as doing the work itself, And I just thought that I couldn't do that. I couldn't juggle the two, the business and the music composing. But I had to do it. Otherwise, I wouldn't have a roof over my head, And I got to a point where projects would start overlapping, and I managed. And so you have to find a way of managing that. And for some people, it's a case of building a team together. I tend not to want to do that. I mean, I'm having to do that to a certain degree at the moment because, I'll have an orchestrator, or I'll have a music editor, or I'll have an assistant. I might have an additional music composer where I'm creatively supervising, some non-critical projects. But I tend to only want to work on projects where I have my own unique voice coming through. And that tends to mean that only I can do it. I can't farm the jobs out to other composers because every project has a unique sound world to it, and I want to be able to retain that. So it's either a case of turning down work or managing it, and it's not easy. It's something that I'm finding navigating myself at the moment. Like with emails, I get bombarded with emails from directors demanding, and expecting music delivered on a daily basis for them to review. So I will, as my maths degree comes into play, where I have to be incredibly organized, I'll have a big chart, and I will allocate, when I'm going to work. I work backwards from deadlines and schedules and just plan out, okay, this project is going to be for 5 weeks, or this one's for 3 months. And I'll break it down on a week by week basis, on a daily basis, or even on an hourly basis, what I'm going to be working on. And on every project, I will always build in contingency times for things to go wrong. I'll even build in time for when I know that things will go wrong, things will extend. So, if I'm working on a feature film, I'll give myself an extra week. And invariably, I will always eat into that contingency time,
Right.
But at least I've built it in to allow for things to go wrong and for things to just drag on longer than they're meant to. So that's just planning and organizing schedules is like, my life is one big spreadsheet. And I know that it's not for everyone. It's not, to have your life planned out like that. I try to build in time where I know I'm going to be tired and exhausted. So I'll try and build in a day off or an evening off, and time to see my husband,
Yeah.
every evening. So meal times and just chill times. And I love to travel as well. So, before a year ago, I was traveling a lot. So I will make sure that I'm on top of stuff, work extra hard so that I can take 2 or 3 days off or travel while I'm working. I like to mix work and pleasure at the same time when I'm traveling abroad. So last year I went to Sundance Film Festival, which was huge fun, but I was managing to sort of work at the same time on my laptop and keep in touch with my assistant in the UK who's covering for me. So all of those things, trying to build that in, before a few years ago, I would never have dreamt of going to a film festival. I thought, I can't go, I'm too busy writing music. And now I make a point of going, you know what, you've got to do these things. You've got to build it into your calendar. And it's really paid off for me. It really helps. So at the moment, I'm not searching for work.
Sure.
Because I've got enough to keep me busy for the rest of the year. But that's a result of having worked hard at pitching and getting the work. So I have to pitch for projects. I still pitch for projects as well.
Sure.
And I'll always make time to pitch. And the most current couple of projects that I'm working on, I had to work hard to get the jobs and to convince the clients that I was the right person for the project. And I really wanted to work on it. So I spent about 2-3 weeks pitching on a project and not being paid for it, because you don't get paid to pitch. So if you want something really bad, you've got to go that extra mile and prove, to the client, the producers and the directors, that you're the right person for the job. Because there's, amazing talent out there. So it's just going the extra mile. And sometimes it pays off, sometimes it doesn't, and it's rejection and having a thick skin and all of that comes into it. But, I just take the rough with the smooth.
Yeah, you have to.
Yeah.
So you sound, you said yourself, you're hyper organized. And when you wake up in the morning, you can look at your spreadsheet and you can say, okay, today I'm going to do this, 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 and this. And you just do it. That takes a lot of discipline.
Yeah, I'm a very much a list person. My to-do list, it will hound me to the day I die. Well, until I get tired and bored and, can't do it. But I'll have a thing on my to-do list sitting there for 2 weeks. I think I need to get rid of that, and just do it. So that's my world at the moment. And I love it. It's not for everyone. You have to have a certain type of personality, I guess, to work like that. But I'm starting to chill a bit more, and I'm just, trying to sort of calm things down and just focus on a handful of bigger projects and let other things pass by. But it's hard because, you have clients that rely on you and trust you, and you develop relationships with them. And I don't like to let people down. So it's just juggling all of that. And so far it's working.
Sure. Well, thanks for adding this interview to your to-do list and making time to speak with me.
Thank you. No, I wouldn't miss it for the world, and I love that. I hear from a lot of young emerging composers a lot. It was tough for me when I started in this industry, and I didn't have any role models growing up. And it was a different period. And now things have really changed. And I know how hard it was for me working my way. And it's still hard. It's a challenge, That's one of the things about this industry, is that I keep myself fresh and motivated, and you're learning all the time. I never rest on my laurels and think I know everything there is to know about music. I don't. Every project is a different creative challenge. And so, I get a lot of composers reaching out to me, and I'll always try and stop and give advice, because I didn't have that, and I really needed that when I was coming up. So I think that it's taken me a longer period of time to get to where I am now. I could have got there a lot faster, but I value and cherish all the experiences I've had. And I think, you just have to be ready. Things will come to you when you are ready for it. I am very much a believer in karma and fate and kismet and all of that. It's just that if I don't get a project, it's okay. I brush myself off and start all over again because, my thinking is that I wasn't ready. I wasn't the right person for the job, So I think having a really thick skin is really, really important. It's okay to not get a job. So I always help going back to, emerging composers. That's why I still give talks and teach this module at the University of London, this class in film scoring, because, I think it's really, really important to nurture and educate the new generation of film composers out there.
Yeah. Well, I'm grateful. So thank you for sharing your story and for helping composers. And I think someone's going to listen to this and they're going to say, oh, I'm going to do that too. And if we can help one person build their career, I think we've succeeded.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's great to chat to you, Garrett.
You too. My pleasure. This episode of The Portfolio Composer has been supported by Dorico 3, the most advanced music notation software ever created. Dorico is designed to save you time, and it gives you the tools you need to produce beautiful and readable scores fast, so you can spend less time fiddling with menus and rules and more time doing what you love, making music. Now you can take Steinberg's music notation and composition software with you wherever you go with Dorico for iPad. Whether you're a composer, arranger, instrumentalist, teacher, or student, Dorico is the ideal app for producing beautiful sheet music that you can share as a PDF or music XML or print directly to your AirPrint-enabled printer. Dorico for iPad is available now in the App Store, or learn more at www.dorico.com/iPad. You can also try the full version of Dorico out completely free of charge for 30 days by downloading the trial version from www.steinberg.net/TPC. Try it today.